Sometimes I look back at life in my village when I was a child growing up in the 80s, and I wonder how the violence had gotten so out of control in my country. Mexico has always had violence in one form or another, but over the past 10 years, it just seems to have masked out into something ugly and evil, which in turn has attracted things that are also ugly and evil. I'm a police officer in the western Michoacan state of Mexico. I've been an officer since I was 18, when I saw firsthand how badly the violence between warring cartels were affecting life and services in my community. If my superiors find out that I posted this, my police career will be over and I will be facing criminal charges. But the public has a right to know what's out there and realize what weapons the cartels now have at their disposal. I'm in my 30s now, and even though I'm still relatively young, I've been through a lot and I have seen a lot. Everything from surviving a kidnapping from some sicarios to being shot during a firefight. On one occasion, I even saw one of my senior officers die when his car blew up after he refused to accept a bribe from the local FA. It's a bloody job and an unforgiving country, and being on the front line as part of the Unidad de Inteligencia Narco, or the police narco intelligence unit, meant that I had to gather intelligence and monitor all things relating to the cartels from an uncomfortably close vantage point. Many times, our operations often totter on the brink of legality, as we are ordered to perform surveillance and spy on suspected narcos without a warrant. Contrary to what you might see in movies like Sicario and documentaries from Vice and Algeria, foot soldiers like myself have remarkably limited technology. With the exception of our police-issue HK-USP pistol, a couple of shortwave radios and a camera or two, and that was it as far as equipment is concerned. Having said that, you can imagine the difficulty in gathering accurate intelligence on these assholes on a Radio Shack budget. It was dangerous work with little chance of backup or any kind of reinforcements if caught. But besides the constant fear of being made, it was pretty boring stuff. A lot of taking pictures, looking through a pair of binoculars and taking notes, all within the confines of a small SUV or a greasy apartment. Because of budget cuts, only 2 officers at a time could be spared for any given intelligence assignment, which could take days, sometimes even weeks. So, we would have to take turns sleeping. The assignment that changed it all happened less than a week after I was appointed to the unit. I was assigned to monitor the activities of a family we suspected were working with the Jalisco cartel in moving the drugs and protecting it with various stash houses in the European area. I was assigned to a more seasoned officer for this assignment, and let's call him Ernesto. He has been in the service for almost 20 years, and he was around to see a string of nasty executions and car bombings in the early 2000s. So it's safe to say that it took a lot to shake him. He was a large man and he didn't speak much except to give me instructions every now and again. Ernesto was a senior member of the unit, but still went on assignments like these to guide younger officers like myself. He held a lot of weight in our police department, and I really wanted to move up in law enforcement, maybe even make chief commissioner one day. So making a good first impression on this assignment was my first priority. The house that we were monitoring was a lavish white marble mansion in a rural part of the town of Tambia. Surrounded by mud huts, haciendas, and small 2-story dwellings, the house stood out like a sore thumb amidst the houses in the slums. Looking at the sprawling castle made me sick to my stomach, thinking of all the blood and tears that it took to build it. How a group of people had no problem paying for their luxuries and opulence, with other people suffering. Ernesto told me the family patriarch, Jose Aguinaldo, operated under the guise of a self-made dry goods merchant for years, and despite repeated arrests, nothing ever stuck. He lived in that mansion with his 35-year-old former beauty queen wife, Larissa, and their 2 children, ages 8 and 10. They were unconfirmed reports of a grandmother also living somewhere on the premises, but no one had ever seen her. We got to Tiamba just before the sun started to set, and we parked our pissy SUV in one of the many winding side streets just opposite the mansion. Get the camera out of the back and set it up. The sources say they receive most of the goods after dark, so let's try and get something small. I did as told and I set up the camera. We sat in the car about 10 meters away from the house, and for most of the night, everything seemed calm. At around 7 p.m., we saw a man in his 50s we identified as Jose, the ringleader, walking a little, frail old woman who I reasoned was his grandmother along the top balcony. He seemed to be talking to her, but we could only try and read his lips. On looking closer, we realized something was off about the old woman. The skin on her face didn't seem to match the skin tone of her neck and arms. I zoomed in on the camera to see that she was wearing a traditional Aztec mask. It was weird. I reasoned that he knew he was being monitored by the police, and he didn't want her identity being revealed, or perhaps known to another cartel, who were very likely doing the same thing that we were doing. It still didn't make sense though. If we or somebody else stormed the house, we could eventually find out who the grandma was, but Ernesto told me not to think too much about it. These guys are very superstitious. They have all kinds of weird traditions and rituals they try to do and keep them safe, he said as he scrolled through his phone. Do you believe any of that, sir? I asked. He paused before answering, as if he needed to think of some sanitized answer instead of the truth. No, that's a bunch of foolishness, he mumbled without looking at me. I thought it was strange. He had to pause before answering such a simple question, but he was a man of few words, so I just dismissed it at that. We sat in the SUV for about 3 more hours, and I took the time to observe how quiet and deserted the streets were in this part of town. A stray dog passed right in front of us, but no other signs of light on the street, which was strange because just a few miles away, there was bustling nightlife with clubs, restaurants, and casinos. But not this part though. This area was a veritable ghost town. No sights and no sounds. Everyone tucked away in their beds. That was before the screaming began. Ernesto was asleep but quickly awoke when it started. Is it an attack? He asked groggily, still half asleep. It doesn't seem like one. I didn't hear any gunfire or explosions. What should we do? Ernesto looked at his watch and he contemplated. We didn't have the numbers or the firepower to stop an attack from a rival cartel on Inquinaldo's house. And even if we did, should we? The man was a piece of donkey shit, and Ernesto said it himself that he had been tried the legal way. Better to let the dogs take care of the dogs. But he still had innocent children inside that house. They didn't do anything to anyone. The screaming continued for about 5 more minutes, and then it stopped just abruptly as it began. Ernesto and I exchanged curious glances, wondering what to do next. We called it in to the officers on the night desk, but they seemed less than excited about the incident. Maybe they were torturing somebody, I said hesitantly. I looked to Ernesto for guidance, but he also seemed genuinely perplexed by the episode. Nah, they had places for things like that. Remember, these people are middlemen at best. They don't have the influence or power to do some stuff like that in the same place they are stashing the drugs, he said. So what now? I asked. He looked back at his watch. It's almost midnight. If anything happens between then and now, call it in again and let me talk to them. I sat there studying the marble structure which almost seemed to glow under the moonlight in the darkness. my mind began running on all different kinds of things that could be going on in that house. Maybe they really were torturing someone. Maybe a rival cartel really did attack them. If that's the case, how come we didn't see anybody drive on or escape? Along with these theories, my mind wandered back to the old woman wearing the mask. What was her role in all this? Was she some kind of cocaine godmother like Griselda Blanco in Colombia? Or was she just another victim of her grandson's business? And then it dawned on me that Aguinaldo was in his early 50s, which meant that if that was his grandmother we saw on the balcony this evening, she would have to be in her 90s at least. I drifted off to sleep while thinking of these things, only to be shaken awake by Ernesto next to me. Before I could ask him what was wrong, I could hear the screaming again. It was shrill, almost feminine in quality, but it had an eerie pitch to it that seemed to shake the rickety SUV that we were sitting in. I scanned the mansion for any source of the noise when Ernesto pointed a single shaking finger up to the balcony, and that's when I saw one of them. It was tall, covered in pale, sagging skin. At first, I thought it was the grandmother again, but looking through the night vision binoculars, I could see that it wasn't. That thing, whatever it was, stood about 8 feet tall, and it had a broad smile across its face, with large eyes and pupils and a disproportionately long neck. In another light, it might have looked like a funny caricature of someone, but it wasn't funny at all. I looked at Ernesto and he raised his index finger to his lip as he drew his pistol. Whatever it was, it didn't see us in the shadows of the alley where we were parked, as it released another blood-curdling scream from its throat. It made me shake to my core. Just looking at this abomination made me want to pull my own eyes out. What the hell was this thing? Eventually, I saw it walk back inside the house, through the doorway to the balcony, bending its long neck to fit inside. What the hell was that? I croaked, still shaken from the ordeal. I don't know, Ernesto said shakily. This was the most scared that I had ever seen him. Seeing a tough old bird like Ernesto on edge made me feel insecure. I was looking to him for security and guidance. I was about to radio in for help when I heard gunfire and explosions coming from inside of the house. Well, we can't sit here all night, I said. They won't believe us. I just saw that thing for myself and I wouldn't believe us, Ernesto replied. The screams continued, but there were human screams mixed in as well. Children's screams. Without thinking, I opened the door and I darted towards the mansion's doors, leaving Ernesto in the passenger side seat. In hindsight, it was a stupid decision. I was an inexperienced police officer armed with just a pistol, storming this house without knowing exactly what I was going to see on the other side. I shot through the fancy glass designs in the front door and I kicked it in. There goes the element of surprise, I thought. Entering through the living room was like taking a step into a museum after hours. Despite the lights being off, I saw a lot of statues and masks from the pre-Columbian era, along with white statues of what I thought were Catholic saints. The furniture was totally destroyed, as the entire living room and waiting areas looked as if they had been ransacked. What the hell was I doing? Am I really going to walk through this house trying to save a drug pusher like Aguinaldo? But he wasn't my priority. It was his children I was really concerned about. I could feel beads of sweat forming on my brow, just as I heard another shrill scream from upstairs. I was hoping by now that Ernesto would have been behind me, but he was still nowhere to be seen. I sighed as I walked up the spiral staircase, with pistol in hand as I walked into the second-story corridor, and into hell itself. The white walls were stained red with blood, as I saw the small body of a child discarded at one end, still wearing her pajamas. The shrill screams were coming from what I can imagine was the master bedroom. Did I really want to see more of this? I had to do something. I turned the corner and I saw the thing, looking directly at me. His eyes seemed to stab at my soul. They were yellow and looked like human eyes, but there was no humanity inside of them before it began grinning. I raised my own pistol and I started firing at it as it charged me from one end of the corridor. Before it could reach me, I burst into what I thought was one of the children's bedrooms and I locked the door behind me. There was no way that I could outrun that thing. Maybe I wounded it and it would go away. I could hear it banging on the door outside, and I knew that it wouldn't hold for much longer. I turned to try and find another door or window to crawl out, but that's when I saw another one. I gasped as I laid eyes on it, but this wasn't like the entity that I saw in the corridor outside. This one was fat, bloated, and naked. With a bald head, he lay on the child's bed, giggling like a little girl, covered from head to toe in blood. I thought it was a man, but this thing was over 8 feet tall. Even lying down, I could tell. With small eyes and a broad smile. I could not stand looking at it. It was so upsetting. Even lying down, I could tell that it was huge. Just a mass of flesh. As it licked its lips and it smacked loudly. Its black, pig-like eyes met mine as it laughed even louder. And it said in an eerie, almost feminine voice, "Another one. I wasn't expecting you, but I want you too." As it grunted, trying to get up on its feet, but I quickly ran past it, and I threw myself outside the window and onto the roof. I felt pain stabbing through my forehead and face as shards of broken glass dug deep into my flesh. What was I thinking? I wasn't thinking. I just wanted to be away from those demons. Before I could gather my hand, a long, red chubby hand stretched out of the broken window and swiped for me. As I darted back, I fell off the roof onto my back. More pain shot through my body as I lay on my back, unable to move. I felt something dragging me away as I slipped in and out of consciousness. I looked up and I saw Ernesto, pulling me back towards the shadows of the alley that we were hiding in. I tried to form words to explain what I saw, but Ernesto only shook his head from side to side and mouthed the words, "Be quiet." He shoved me into the passenger side seat of the SUV, and he drove us away. Before passing out from the pain, I remember looking back at that house to see the mansion explode. I woke up a few days later at a military hospital a few miles south. No sooner had I woke up, I was confronted by members of our intelligence gathering department who sat and transcribed everything I had witnessed and experienced from beginning to end. I was also visited by senior officers from our military intelligence unit and asked to sign documents restricting me from discussing any of the events that I had experienced. I was never given a full idea of what I saw exactly, at least not until Ernesto came to visit me a few days later. I saw on the news the explosion at the house was blamed on the work of a rival cartel, but he explained that he called it an airstrike. And despite the shortcomings of our unit, we did maintain close communication with our air guard, and they said they dispatched a drone less than 30 minutes after he had made the call. "That fat man and the giraffe were both cooked," he said. "What?" I replied. "That's what the top level people are calling them. We really don't know what they are. The bodies were taken away by a branch of the government that I had never seen before." "So they weren't demons?" I asked. "I don't know. All I know is that they were all burnt up when backup finally got here. I don't think I'm even supposed to be telling you this right now, but you risked your life for those children. You deserve to know what you were up against," he said hoarsely. That's when I remembered. "What happened to the children?" He paused for a while before beginning. both gone, but not by the airstrike. According to forensics, they were done before that. Parts of them are still missing. Jose, his wife, his grandmother, all of them were found chewed up into this big heap of flesh in one of the rooms. It was awful. Laying in that hospital bed, I realized my questions only led to more questions. What the hell were those things? I've been hearing about things like those since I was younger, Ernesto said, breaking the silence. Since I was a child, I heard about them. The lesser gods the Aztecs used to worship. I heard they were real and lived in the plains and deserts, but I never saw one. Not until that night. I couldn't believe anything that he was saying. But then again, what was the alternative? What other sign was there to this entire incident? I could only sigh. I think the violence and the carnage going on is drawing them back out. They can smell it from wherever they're hiding, and they come out for more, he said. So what now? As if the cartels weren't bad enough, we have to deal with these things, I asked. He studied my face before speaking. What now is you getting better? Get better and we go out to fight again. Whoever, whatever.